Torchlight Academy has some non-compliance issues in the area of exceptional children. And that's what we will be discussing today. We will only be discussing Torchlight. And we're going to start with Ms. Sherry Thomas is going to make a presentation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The Exceptional Children Division must provide assurances to the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs in our annual IDEA grant. And this is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant that funds or provides federal funds for our special education programs. Every state has this grant, and every state must assure that we are upholding our general supervision requirements as an agency, as an SEA, to ensure that there is compliance with both programming and with the fiscal use of these federal dollars. And by programming, I mean compliance to IDEA requirements. I'm not talking about a reading program. I'm talking about the actual implementation of the special education program. So every year when we complete this grant, we must make that assurance on this document in this grant application that we submit. Each of the LEAs, or public school units as we're calling them now, so that includes charters, that includes lab schools, our ISD school, any public school unit that wishes to apply for an IDEA grant, subrecipient grant, from our federal dollars, may do so through a grant system. These PSUs also must assure in their application, they check an assurance box that says, we are complying with IDEA, and that includes the programmatic and the fiscal requirements of use of those federal dollars and the reporting of actions that are required around those two areas. Today, I'm here to talk about non-compliance issues that have not been corrected for more than a year, we're pushing almost 2 years now, and yet we are receiving grant applications assuring that faith is being provided by Torchlight Academy. You have a packet in front of you, and I'm going to start with the first document on the top. What you will find behind this initial general highlights document are evidences that will be referenced throughout this document. Some of these things you have already seen, but we put them here for your convenience to reference back to. Formal notification and monitoring visits always occur. There are reports and there are closing letters that are always sent to the head of schools and to the EC director or coordinator, and this is for every school, every charter school, every PSU, every traditional school in the state of North Carolina on a monitoring cycle. We have been in a 5-year monitoring cycle that we are just completing with this year. It also, in this process, establishes 1 year permitted for corrections of noncompliance. The corrective action as a result of the monitoring visits is supposed to be completed in partnership with the Exceptional Children's Division, and in particular a program monitor that is assigned to the region in which these schools reside. And we also have an EC regional coordinator who's the liaison between those local EC directors, charter EC coordinators or directors back to our office. And so these folks go in to provide that support when there is a finding of non-compliance. Torchlight was monitored in February of 2020. They had from April 21st, 2020, the date that the report was issued to them officially, and that's included in this packet, until April 21st, 2021 to make required corrections. As I mentioned, those reference items are here in the folder for you. We have also included in this packet a technical assistance log That, excuse me, that includes information for both Torchlight and Three Rivers, as Ms. Andrews was the EC director for both schools during the time of the monitoring and up until recently when we received information that she was no longer serving as the EC director. So you will find in that log some references to Three Rivers, but the reason is because we were trying to tie up loose ends at those schools in her role as EC director for both of those schools. Do you have any questions about the documents or about the process I'm going to follow before we get started? Okay. So we did complete this site visit that was announced. Their schools are informed, LEAs are informed, PSUs are informed of when these visits will occur. It's a common time that is arranged, and the monitoring team goes in. Sometimes we did this virtually, sometimes we were on site. At the exit conference of the monitoring day, which was February the 26th, 2020, still on site with the team from Torchlight, the monitoring staff did explain the corrections that were required, and at that point offered training to the staff. Torchlight Academy declined that training in favor of resolving their issues internally and independently of DPI, the EC division. And so we notified Torchlight Academy that ECATs must be used to manage EC records, because I believe at that monitoring visit, they were not using the electronic system. That is policy in state board, that this is the system to be used for all special ed documentation. That was approved by the state board and hasn't been in place since we launched ECATs in 2018. The pandemic closed schools in March, and we all know that was a very difficult time. We submitted or issued the report on April the 21st, and we included again the corrective action. We itemized the process that would bring that school back into compliance, and we also described how we would close that monitoring, because we have to send a letter that says, here are the findings. When all the corrections are complete, then there is a closing letter that says you have met compliance, everything is complete, we're closing this non-compliance. We had about 18, and you can see them in this log, there were about 18 emails or calls from the division staff, from our EC division to Torchlight Academy to monitor their progress with corrections and to offer assistance. And this happened between January the 16th, 2020, prior to our monitoring visit, up through September the 20th, 2021. There were 8 replies from the EC director that acknowledged the receipt of our email. They indicated that they were still working on the corrections, or they would apologize for the delay. The first request for training that we received for ECATS, which is our Every Child Accountability Tracking System, our electronic EC data management system, we received that on August the 24th. So we sent links at that time to the EC director for she and the EC staff to complete those courses in Canvas, and that happened around August 24th. In April, and I think it says April 2020, that actually should be April 2021, and I apologize for that typographical error. In April of 2021, the EC director for Torchlight, who was also the EC director for Three Rivers, confirmed that all EC staff had completed those ECATS modules in Canvas. However, we can go in on the backside to see everyone that has been in that course, because we provide CEUs for completion of those courses. And no one at that point from Torchlight had been in and completed those courses. Before the visit, which was back in January of 2020 till September the 1st, there were about 45 emails, and those are documented in that log, or contacts by phone with Torchlight Academy reviewing the ongoing non-compliance. The staff were periodically reviewing in ECATS to see corrective action had been made, if records had been corrected. We do that with all PSUs as we're monitoring. It's a great tool for us. We don't have to go in and check all the records physically in paper form. Through this electronic system, we can go in and confirm that the procedure has been followed appropriately, that appropriate signatures are in place, that all the components of the IEP are in place. And so we do that for all monitoring visits where there is a non-compliance. We go in regularly and check any ECAPs to see if those corrective actions have been made. In June, around the 15th of 2021, my division staff, and this is particularly the program monitors that were going in to check and continue the monitoring of the compliance issues, observed that there were altered documents in ECAPs. And by this I mean there were previously implemented IEPs of record for a student that were altered with new dates without an IEP meeting being indicated. There was no data to show there was a meeting, but dates were changed, grades were changed for current IEPs, or old IEPs to make them current IEPs. At that point, these altered documents, again, we can see on the backside who has gone in and who has altered those documents. And they were associated with Chantrice Andrews, who held an LEA Admin 4, which we call a super user, in all of our PSUs for ECAPs. And that is when somebody puts in absolutely the wrong last name for a parent, and it gets through the process and we realize that they've made an error. It is not to correct compliance errors, it is to correct information that has been reported inappropriately, technical errors, typos, those kind of edits. So that super user has that ability to go in and fix those errors so that things which may throw them out of non-compliance because it wasn't the correct date or the correct information can be cleaned up. We give one of those to each school, and we watch that carefully because the whole intent is not to go in and create IEPs without a meeting. It's to fix those technical errors. On July the 22nd, we withdrew the permission type of Administrator 4 for Ms. Andrews, and we changed her to an EC Teacher 2, which still provided her full access to manage the records, to update documents, to complete IEP meeting requirements within the system. We just removed the access to make those edits into those finalized documents. It did restrict her from completing federal reporting, altering the finalized documents, as I said, deleting finalized documents, and inactivating students. We delayed that notification for two reasons. One, to assess the scope of the altered documents, because we do a random sampling when we go in to check for these corrections. And through a random sampling found multiple documents that had been altered. So we didn't go in and check every child. Instead, we withdrew that permission until we had time to go in and do a further investigation. And then we also stopped it because she had not been through the ECAPS training. We did not want other errors to be corrected that they were going to have to go back and correct and have more non-compliance. And so we limited that for that second reason. On August the 23rd, we heard from Ms. Andrews. She requested assistance because she could no longer perform some of those activities in ECAPS, and that's when she realized her user type had been changed. We received that request from her after we had notified all PSUs on August the 19th that our indicator 7 data was due on August the 20th. The reporting window for indicator 7 was between August the 2nd and August the 20th. Again, she reached out to us on August 23rd. There were numerous communications that we had sent to EC directors. We do a weekly update that goes out every Wednesday, and it goes to every EC director and every EC chart coordinator in the state, with updates, with information, with reminders about what is coming due. We consolidated all of our memos and all of our emails into that one weekly communication so that everything's in one place and on one day. It makes it easier for local directors and EC EC coordinators to have that information, know when to look for it, know when it's coming, and be able to respond to it, and it not get 5 and 6 emails from our division get lost through email. So there were many reminders that went through that vehicle, as well as our regional coordinator. I mentioned that person who's a liaison between the director or charter coordinator and our office. They also send reminders out after those notifications go out. We received from Ms. Andrews the allegation that the change in ECAP's permission prohibited the submission of indicator 7. But that's moot because they didn't request support until 3 days after it was due, so they were going to be delayed even if she had had that access. There's a reference for you, EC monitoring report 10-721, Torchlight DP collaboration checklist. So after finding these altered IEPs and altered paperwork in ECAPs, we decided that we needed to schedule an unannounced visit in those sites that are owned by this company, because Ms. Andrews was then the EC director for both schools. And Three Rivers had not been under a monitoring review cycle for the last year. So we took a team of about 5 staff from the EC division, members of the Office of Charter School joined us, we had 1 member from them on each team. We asked for records so we could confirm or compare the information we received in ECAS with what was in the written documents. And I don't think this is in the notes here, but we weren't able to get access to any of those EC records. They were locked in a file cabinet, and we were told that the director had the key. And while these records are to be kept confidentially and safe and locked, at no time should you not be able to access those records if needed for a student with a disability. And so that brings just a concern of accessibility for that student, and not teachers or other folks who needed access to that, not having that access to get that information on these students. So our records review was a part of this routine monitoring for our previous monitoring visit corrective actions. Some of the items that we were still seeing in ECAPS had been evident in that visit in February of 2020. And in response to this notification of intent to conduct an on-site visit, we couldn't do that because we couldn't get to the records. There was a lack of documentation. We had no access to confirm or at either side whether these continued compliance issues were in place. Consultants did go back the next day. They were told that they came back the next day that there would be someone there with the key to unlock the file cabinets. And so they did go back on the next day. I think that was a Tuesday, but 21st, and they did go through the records that were available. We also asked for some physical documents, because anytime we have this type of non-compliance, we also have to ensure that there has been appropriate use of the federal funding through a fiscal use. So are those federal dollars going to support what is in the grant that has been indicated and submitted? For example, if a teacher is being paid with those federal dollars, is that teacher in essence being actually paid with those federal dollars? It's a checks and balance that we are required to do from a federal level, to ensure that we're using federal funds appropriately. We were unable to get any of the fiscal documents that day that we asked for as well. And I believe Mr. McQueen was to meet the team back at Torchlight. He told us, I was at Three Rivers, so he told us at Three Rivers all the fiscal documents were at Torchlight, and he responded that he would get them the next day, but I don't believe he made himself available at that point for these fiscal documents. We began extensive coaching with the EC director on the 22nd of September. We've documented those in that log, and you can read that at your leisure. Our staff requested access to EC teacher schedules, to the fiscal information, to contracts, those sorts of things. That is very common. We do that with any of our monitoring visits. And we ask for those paper copies of the student records. And all of that is outlined in the report that is dated 10/7/21. We did conduct a briefing or a technical assistance call with the Torchlight Academy leadership and the EC director on September the 21st. After that second day of visit back to Torchlight, we outlined again the requirements of ECAT's training and that would have to occur before any adjustments to ECAT's privileges, higher level of access within that system could be provided. The EC division staff confirmed that Torchlight did complete all of the required ECAT's training on or around the 21st of October. We had already been told once that had been done. So we do have evidence that staff that were in the building on the 21st of October had completed all of this training. Again, continued extensive coaching with the EC director and the activities that needed to be completed to meet their non-compliance. And this is how we approach all of our non-compliance findings when we go into a monitoring visit. And it's really rare that we don't find something, just because it's a human nature. You miss crossing a T or dotting an I, you miss a date. It's not that we expect everybody to be 100% perfect all the time, but we do expect the cooperation and the response in a timely manner to fix those corrections, because that year is a very long time for us to assume students are receiving appropriate services, and we can't confirm that through appropriate documentation. We did not approve as of yet a high level of admin for access for Torchlight. There has been a shift in their EC director, but until we could confirm completion of the ECAS modules and clarified some other duties that this director was performing, we offered and have been working with Torchlight to submit their December 1 child count. So we have not delayed their ability to submit their December 1 child count. Mr. Squibb is the new executive director for exceptional children at Torchlight, and he has, while Torchlight has said that to us that he does not or has not had sufficient access to complete his duties in that role, we have evidence in ECATS that he was the LEA representative for 11 IP team meetings that occurred based on the documentation in ECATS from November the 24th, 2021 to December the 3rd, 2021. However, dates around these events in ECATS and school calendar have suggested that was Thanksgiving break. So we do have some continuing questions about the dates of some of that paperwork. The 2020 performance framework indicated that the EC program at Torchlight was compliant. That's because the EC division provides the year of correction before any non-compliance is reported. So if you are found non-compliant in the midst of that year, you are not reported as non-compliant because you are in the corrective action period of time. I know many of you have had visits from our team, and I hope that makes sense to you, that we don't penalize while you're in the corrective action phase of the monitoring visit. What else do I need to say? Just that I mentioned again, the references provided, I believe show that the Exceptional Children Division has really gone above and beyond to support the school in meeting their corrective action, in providing them with support where they did not have a skill set to complete the corrective action or needed support in doing that. The last thing I do want to call your attention is near the back of the packet. And it's an email dated November the 6th And this and the staple document behind it include about 20 students that either have not been corrected out of noncompliance or were completed in that mid-November to early December timeframe and have additional errors that are in a line and in the pattern of the noncompliance and the errors we've seen going back to our monitoring visit in February of 2020. Lastly, the last page in this packet is from the fiscal monitoring column. As I said before, anytime we go back, because we've not had the non-compliance corrected in a timely manner, we then partner with our fiscal monitors to ensure that we're tracking the money with the services. And there were non-compliance items found around time and effort, around contracted services, and around maintenance of fiscal effort. We are unable to get a budget with budget codes, so we cannot confirm that a teacher of exceptional children who is being counted as providing EC services within the IDEA grant application is actually being paid with federal dollars. This is a one-to-one match we have to do anytime we do this fiscal monitoring. The fiscal monitors have not received all teacher schedules yet as we asked for. We can't confirm how the funds are being expended again because there's no budget with budget codes available to us at this time. Around contracted services, contracts and paid invoices were submitted, but the invoices again don't have budget codes. And so we can't track. It's like whether that's coming, when you pay a bill, is it coming out of your checking account or is it coming out of your savings account? You're going to know that if you do an online payment. We can't tell which account these, or what account the contract payments are coming from, even though there's an indication that that's happening through the grant application. And then finally, maintenance of effort, which is a really important piece that IDEA requires us to monitor. And federal dollars are to supplement, not supplement the services of special education in a district, in a public school year. So each year, each PSU has to show over the last 3 years how they've met maintenance of effort, meaning you can't expend more in federal dollars than you do in state or local funds. And the pattern at which, or the ratio at which you are expending state or local, or state and local against federal has to be within the same ratio, for lack of a better way to describe that. For 18-19, 19-20, excuse me, for 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20, Torchlight has not made maintenance of effort. We are still waiting to get documentation to be able to look at their maintenance of effort, their MOE for the 2021 school year.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Thomas?
Do you mind making that last statement again about the amount of federal dollars? And was it state and local?
So each PSU has to, and I don't have those exact figures for you, but I can tell you in the 17-18 school year, the 18-19 school year, and the 19-20 school year, Torchlight did not meet maintenance of efforts, meaning they did not maintain their ratio of state or local dollars to federal and had to pay back federal dollars.
Okay.
The 1 through 15 on the first page where you said the EC director confirmed all EC staff had completed training. Who was the EC director at that time? Okay. And did you ever figure out what the confusion was with that?
We just received an email that everyone had completed the training. But we go in and verify that because they get CEUs for completing those courses. it's not a 30-minute course to go through, so we want to reward them for their time and the completion of that work. So they get CEUs, but only after they've completed all Canvas modules.
Am I correct in understanding, I just want to be clear on what, one of the comments you made, it's referring to, I guess, items 20, 23, 24, 25, about the September 2021 visit. Am I correct in hearing you said that fiscal documents for one school were unavailable because they were housed at another school?
That's what I was told personally.
In your experience of working with many schools who may share an EMO, do you typically find that as a common practice?
No, sir. No, sir. We have, I cannot, and I've been on several monitoring visits, and I've asked my staff if this is something they have encountered, and today we've not encountered not being able to get access to both the fiscal records, the financial reports that were requested, and the student records that are on site.
May I ask a couple follow-up questions?
Sure.
What was the response that you received from Miss Andrews or anyone associated with Torchlight when you brought to their attention that IEPs had been changed or altered, or did they have a response?
I don't have that information because I did not contact Ms. Andrews directly. It was communicated by our section chief for policy monitoring and audit, and it may be in this assistance and TA log, but I can certainly find out that information and get that to you in just a couple of minutes.
Okay, and then one more question.
I don't know if it was an email or a phone call. So.
And then one more question regarding items 32, 33. You're showing that 11 IEP team meetings were held, or supposedly held, over Thanksgiving break.
According to,
Would it be safe to assume then that parents would have participated in those meetings as well? Like, would you say IEP team meetings, would that, I mean, to me, that's the EC director,
it would require a parent being available and the school team, the full IEP team being in place to conduct the meeting. I can't respond to that.
So, but supposedly then, parents could attest that they were in those meetings during Thanksgiving break. That's a fair assumption, correct?
Right. Typically, typically these meetings are not held during breaks during school vacation time.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Well, you said that the records had been altered.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you be more specific about what exactly we're talking about?
I can give you two very specific examples that I recall, and I do have copies of this. We've done screenshots with documentation. There was one IP for a student from Wake County that the dates have been changed to make it a current IP. That was at least more than a year old. And there was another one from Harnett County where the student had previously had an IP in Harnett County, was being served at Torchlight, and those dates were changed.
So were the dates, did it reflect that Torchlight had held the meeting, or did it appear that the IEP from the previous district continued?
It was a period of time where it wasn't a continuation from the previous district. And it was altered by a member of Torchlight.
Torchlight staff.
Without indication that there was no data to show that there was anything reviewed to develop a new IEP. The documentation didn't support an IEP team meeting to happen. And it is not common to go in and just change the data on the IEP because you have to update the present level of performance, the goals that have been met, the services, the grade, things change and should be progressing here with you. And so we could find no indication in the system that there had been an IEP meeting to make those changes, and no data to support that.
Prior to the site visit that you made, once you noticed the changes in the IEPs, had Torchlight been notified that they were past their 1 year?
Yes, ma'am. That's in the documentation law.
Along those lines, with revocation of level 4 access, Was there a notification that access had been terminated and the process given to them about how to communicate with you all to get changes made?
Correct. We, I'm gonna go back to the bullet point, because
That's
we did not
number-
notify her, Ms. Andrews, immediately,
Right.
because we were trying to do further verification, we just removed that. So that happened July 22nd, she reached out to us on August the 23rd, and the reason we didn't notify her is we were trying to do a deeper dive to see how many items we might be dealing with.
And I'm assuming at that time, a process was shared, or was a process shared about how to continue moving forward without that access?
Yes, and that was that technical assistance would be provided from our division staff to help move forward reporting items that they needed for them until we could get these errors corrected.
Has Torchlight had access to federal EC funds through this entire period?
Not since July 1, 2020. We have not allotted funds because the noncompliance has still been ongoing, and we have continued noncompliance. It's not just the items we found in February of 2020. Those same type issues have continued to happen as we go through paperwork and we go through ECAPs and we go through the review. So we did notify them in that report that we were delaying funds until we could get this noncompliance.
And to this date,
Correct.
those funds have not been restored.
That is correct. That's correct. EC, I.
Yeah,
don't
EC
know about
funds,
the
EC
federal.
funds,
We
yes.
have not withheld, we can't withhold the federal on our own, but we have withheld. EC.
What's the level of, the last time they were funded anyway, what was the level of funding for Torchlight?
But I will find out for you.
Thank you.
We have over 300 LEAs.
Yeah.
It's really hard to.
I'm not even sure I know
maintain
my
all those
own.
numbers in my head, and I apologize, I didn't think about that being a question, but I will get that for you in just a few minutes.
Any other questions for Ms. Thomas? Eric?
Ouch. So, I don't wanna stay on this point too much longer, but the idea of altered, it's a specific word choice that you're making because of unorthodox nature of that date was changed, but all the other aspects of the file weren't. Am I summarizing? Can you summarize it again one more time? Rather than the word completed, or rather than the word changed, or?
A previously compliant IEP at the time frame in which it was compliant was changed with information to make it appear to be a compliant IEP with no documentation that IEP needs had been held, data had been reviewed, and the process had been followed. Is that
It is, and that specific type of language and observation, was there any, and I'm sorry if you went over it, was there a response given to it that when you brought it to the school and say, this is altered?
I'm not gonna give you quotes word for word, but the implication was we need help. We're struggling with how to use the system, which is when we decided we needed to go back in and do that unannounced visit to see if there were other areas. Because we'd been trying to help, we had offered help, we had offered training, and we had again been told that all staff had gone through the training in Kansas of how to use the system, and that had not been done.
So you go and do the unannounced visit and don't have access to the files. Was there other observational notes that you'd like to share?
I was at Three Rivers,
Okay.
not at Torchlight, so I can tell you, the assistant director, Matt Hoskins, was at Torchlight. We both wanted to go to support the team and to be able to work with the staff in the school to see if we could figure out how to support them. And there were, from my team of special children experts, great concerns about the level of special education services that were being delivered at Torchlight.
What was their specific concern?
Um, Not a lot of direct instruction based on an IEP that was being delivered. They had difficulty finding out about which students were EC from administrators in the building that day. Did not tell them which students, or would not tell them which students were EC. We had printed out from Power School the list of students that are identified as having exceptional needs in both those schools, and so we tried to find those kids within the classes. It was a very hard day for my team because they felt that students were not getting the services they needed and really couldn't identify what those services might be because they couldn't get access to records, and the IEPs didn't appear to be updated and correct in the details.
So you come back the next day, that's surprised or that's announced or
It's
unannounced?
announced. We were told to come back the next day.
That's right,
And
they
we would
told you
have
that.
access to all records, and all the physical records would be at Torchlight.
And again, can you just summarize quickly what actually happened on?
Staff was able at both Three Rivers and Torchlight to access the special education folders, but the physical documents, and a list was given the day before of all the items that were needed to, as part of our monitoring. And that was not provided for either school.
I guess the last overall question, just so I understand severity within this, there's a lot of people both listening and are in this room right now, who hear a lot of this, and the quantity is certainly there. How would you help us understand the severity of this last almost 2 years of non-compliance, either relative to your experience with, as you noted, 300, I think you said 300, other, or just in terms of severity you've seen during your time?
It's very severe. And the continued noncompliance is very concerning. I've not experienced this more than a couple of times, and I've been here for 14 years at the department.
Where are we today? I'm sorry, that's maybe my last question. Where are we today in this?
Still waiting for the compliance from February, the type of compliance from February of 2020 to be correct.
May I ask another follow-up question?
I was gonna ask a question, but I'll go after you.
Ms. Andrews was the EC director at both schools, correct?
Based on the records that were
And she would have been the EC director at the time of the unannounced visit in September, correct? Was she at either school?
Yes, sir.
What was that answer?
No, she was not at either school.
What was her rationale given as to,
She was on leave, I believe is what we were told. She
So-
was out.
so presumably, and we can ask questions later, that she, presumably is the person who had the key to the files that the key was missing?
That's what we were told, our team was told, yes, that she had the key.
Can you explain you said you were unable to document or verify how the funds had been spent because of how it was coded. Can you explain that?
Because there was no code, we were not provided with a budget. When you complete an IDEA subrecipient grant, you have to complete a budget that shows what line items you're using, what approved codes are being used for, and how much money is being spent for that particular line item. We have an invoice, and we have a check or a payment, but we have no funding code to know where the payment came from, which line item it came from, and which pot of money it came from.
How generally would you be able to determine that?
All PSUs typically will give you a budget that shows what's coming out of federal and what's coming out of state. They break it down in their budget by those funding codes. And even charter schools that we have done fiscal monitoring with, and we monitor all new charter schools, by the way, the first year they're open, so that we can get them on the right track for ensuring the budgets are done, the grants aligned, and we try to provide that support so they don't get 4 or 5 years down the road and then have to do a lot of work to repair and correct. Even in charters that are owned by other management companies, we get a budget with budget codes of what funds are being used and which dollars, whether it's federal or state or local, is for these individual items. The invoice usually has a budget code on it.
So presumably their 1920 application, IDA application, was approved because they were actually getting money in that year.
Correct.
And you have to submit a budget with your application. There was no way to tell whether or not the funds were being pulled from that budget. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Any
Just
other
one
questions?
last question
Go ahead.
for me. So the day that the unannounced visit, you said that the staff that did the visit were unable to identify who was or wasn't EC, but the next day you went back and you were given access to the folders. Were you then was the team able to identify, did everything equal out? Did you identify the students?
I don't think it equaled out 1-to-1, but I think they were able to track some of the students in both locations because we replicated that on both sides.
What do you mean by not equal out 1-to-1?
For every folder, we found the right student that day. I mean, they found some of the students, most of the students that they found paperwork.
So in other words, there were more students on the list than were folders available?
I can't confirm that. I know they did not find every child on their head count at that point, but, that happens. Kids are out, they move the week before you come, they
Gotcha.
shift, so.
Is there any record of that, like quantity?
It's in the report, I believe. It's in that report.
Are you able to state the number of students that were receiving EC services at Torchlight at this time?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Or that
At
were
this time
purported
today,
to be receiving?
I know that the 20 we have identified that at this point are not compliant for our December child count, and they've been notified of that. This isn't new information. Is a pretty significant number of their PC population. It's my understanding, but I will get you those numbers.
Now, when you do the child count, are you counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Counting every student
To make,
who has been made eligible for services through proper procedure, evaluation, determination by an IEP team that they qualify for services and have an IEP.
Any other questions for Ms. Thomas?
I just want to make sure I understand the relationship between your offices and the special education coordinator, I forgot the name.
Ms. Andrews?
Ms. Andrews. You weren't able to contact her during the visits. There was some downgrading of her access. Is there anything else that maybe got lost in the shuffle here with regard to the communication that's been there since those unannounced visits?
You will see in that log there have been questions, and some of the same questions have been asked that we continue to provide the same responses for, the same guidance for. And there's still been some difficulty in implementing those recommendations.
Ms. Thomas, in light of the noncompliance, what are your obligations from the EC department relative to this? And what kind of consequences are we talking about for noncompliance?
That's a great question. So we don't do this just because it's fun to go and give people a hard time about the records and their documentation. We have to respond to our general supervision requirements within our IDEA grant that we submit to the Department of Ed, Office of Special Education Programs. We have to ensure that we are providing that supervision of compliance, that EC services are being delivered. So I now have a charter school that has 3 years not made their maintenance of effort, which means they've supplanted with federal dollars over state or local and/or local spending. And they have not met compliance requirements that are egregious. I'm not talking again about the wrong date was put in and then was corrected. It's about the process not happening appropriately that ensures that faith is being provided, and that IDEA is being followed. And so I am not able to release any of those federal dollars until this non-compliance is corrected. And we have a way to support this school, to ensure that budget is aligned, and to ensure that those federal dollars that we are allotting are being used based on the grant that was submitted. Because at this point, we cannot show how anything is spent compared to what's in the grant application because of the lack of budget with budget cuts.
What happens if they don't?
Ultimately, if we don't, you have a second part to that. Ultimately, as a state, they could withhold our federal dollars because we have not provided due diligence over our due process requirements.
Does entire state's
Yes,
money?
ma'am. They could delay our funds. You know, we received funds for this year, they could delay our funds next year. They could reduce our funds next year.
What recourse does the Department of Public Instruction have in terms of EC, when you when you try to get this fixed and it's not fixed? What else can you do besides just keep asking?
There is an IDEA, an option to sanction, to have a sanctioning hearing, which means the board of any school who is out of compliance and has been significantly out of compliance could be called before the State Board of Education for a public hearing to address that significant non-compliance. It's called sanctioning. And if that occurs, all federal dollars would then be withheld if they are found continuing to be out of compliance. If they are sanctioned by the board, then all federal money, not just EC, would be withheld. That's in the federal requirements for funding.
Just for clarification, has there been any contact whatsoever with families, either through, complaints or anything else?
We had a state complaint 3 or 4 years ago that was then withdrawn by the family.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Thomas? Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Would you remain?
Yes.
Mr. McQueen, this is your opportunity to respond.
I want to introduce our board today, Dr. Van Dix, who will have an opening statement before you,
Okay.
and Dr. McQueen is the
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
I'm Dr. Pam Bingsley, and I am the chair of the Board of Directors for Torchlight Academy. I've served on that board and as the chair since 1999, almost 23 years. It was I who stood before this board 20-something years ago, when Torchlight, formerly known as Northeast Raleigh Charter Academy, that school was in trouble. We had lost most of our students, we were down to 14 students, and I had just hired the McQueens and came in and asked this board to give us an opportunity to keep that school running because it was a good school for the community. In the 20 years that we have worked with the McQueens, we have made many accomplishments. I think even if you look back at what Northeast Raleigh Charter Academy was and where we are today, then you can see how we have really been a force in our community. So we have done some very good work. In engaging the McQueens, we've had lots of accomplishments. We are and have been, one of the schools that's had the highest growth scores of charter schools and of North Carolina public schools. So we've been really making progress with our students. We serve 90% at-risk kids, and we are still making progress with those kids. We're rated top 10 in all of the schools in North Carolina. So we're doing very good work. The school has exceeded growth every year since in 2016. The school is a solid C school, all right? And we've served our community for 20 years. And I think if you look back at our record, you will even see that in those 20 years, we've been doing exceptional and getting good ratings, even for our EC program. I need for you to keep in mind today that the 2 years that we're talking about is 2 years when everybody was in a panic because nobody knew what to do when COVID hit us. Now, when COVID hits us, it's a little bit different than when it hits everybody else. And I need for you to keep that in mind as you consider what's being presented today. Our board has been apprised that we have a problem with our exceptional children's program, that we are not in compliance. We have been advised of that. We have tried to make some efforts to get back into compliance. It's not like we're trying to stay out of compliance. We want to be in compliance just as much as DPI wants us to be in compliance. We're not being obstinate and trying not to do what we're being asked to do. We do have some issues and we recognize that, and we're trying to correct those issues. When we were notified that we had some problems, Dr. McQueen immediately established a task force to look into what was going on. She attempted to immediately increase our capacity in terms of our EC employees, or our EC teachers, our EC director. So we made some adjustments trying to get things going back. And she's hired people who are licensed and who understand EC and the things that need to be done, especially with ECAS. We did have a problem with ECAS, all right? And so, but she's hired people who can now come in and help us with those problems and correct those problems. I'm sure that you know hiring 2 licensed people who are experienced with ECAS cannot be an easy task because those people are really in demand. But we've been able to hire 2 new people who are able to actually help us. So we're not trying to stay in non-compliance. Our board did receive the October 7th Exceptional Children's Monitoring Report that identified basically 3 issues that we needed to be taken care of. And so we looked, we see that there is, we're being told that we're financially and programmatically out of compliance. When we see the word systematic, that says to us that we've not done anything right. All right? Systematic to me says that you're looking and it's a system that just will not work and cannot work. Well, if that's the case, why did it work all the way up into 2016? So it's not, it's a issue that is related to where we are right now with the struggles that we're having right now, and we're working to fix those problems, all right? Then there was the issue of confidence in our leadership's ability to resolve the non-compliance. Well, we hired people who we believe are able to fix and help us with the non-compliance. Maybe the people we had in place when we went to ECATS and we're not able to do that, but we've hired people since then who are able to do that. The school's capacity to resolve systematic non-compliance. In addition to our new EC director, who has a level 4 ECAS access for several other schools. So we're not hiring somebody who's new at this. We've hired somebody who has had experience working with ECAS. so that he can help us with the things that we're concerned about, or the things that we're in non-compliance to. Another interesting incident for us is that when we asked to hire a new person, we were told that that person could not help us with what we needed because that person worked at another school or would be working in two schools. We were not told, and nor do I know that it's a law, that a person cannot work in two schools, all right, or in two jobs. And so we don't believe that we should have ever been told that we could not hire that person. That person should have been able to be hired and still help us. So we've been trying to make the changes that we need to make in order for the school to come into compliance. All I'm saying is that the board is confident that with the additional 3 people that we have hired, and with our proven track record, we've been in compliance all the way up until we started this last issue, which really came about. We got a report on February, and the school school system shut down in March. All right, COVID became our first priority. How do we educate students who don't have all the tools that are needed to be educated at home? How do we educate those students? How do we keep in touch with those students? How do we even get the parents up to the place where they can help the students? That became our greatest issue. And having that be our greatest issue, yes, we did find ourselves out of compliance with our EC program, but we're working. Now that we're back in school, and now that we're trying to, get back to where everybody else is trying to get back to getting things somewhat back to normal, we have committed to trying to straighten out our EC problems. I need you to understand that. So for us, the problems with the COVID pandemic, how we're gonna monitor children, our conversion to the new EC program, all of that has kind of put us behind in trying to get things back to normal and back on track. But we were on track. For 20 years, almost, Torchlight has been on track. We have been commended for our EC programs over the years. We have worked diligently to try to keep our programs up to standard. It's just been these last years that we're having a problem with. So today, our team is here to give you additional details to provide insight and clarity on how we intend to resolve the problems that we have and the things that we're doing right now and will continue to do to make sure that we don't have this problem ever again. We're updating our progress. We hope to today even show you how we're updating things and what we're trying to do to get ourselves back into compliance. We're not trying to stay out of non-compliance, and it was not because we were just being obstinate. It was just trying to figure out how to survive and how to get things done that we knew we needed to get done by our students during this time period. So with that, I'm gonna call on Dr. McQueen.
Thank you.
Dr. McQueen is our school administrator, school principal. She's gonna explain to you and talk to you about the program itself.
Good afternoon, Charter School Advisory Board and staff. Torchlight has served the community for 20 years. During the 20 years, we have taken children to China several times. We've created a sister school in China. We were #1 in math and reading growth in the state of North Carolina. We've hosted White House officials at Torchlight Academy. Mr. McLean has been invited to speak on a panel with Betsy DeVos, then U.S. Secretary of Education. I myself was nominated to become a member of the State Board of Education in the past. I was a board member of the North Carolina Association of Public Charter Schools since its inception. Torchlight was the only school invited to participate in the Governor's Martin Luther King celebration. At that event, our students brought down the house with their delivery of I Have a Dream spoken in English, Mandarin, and Arabic. On a personal note, Torchlight has been my life for the past 20 years. I feel blessed to be of service to our over 690% free and reduced lunch students. 10 years ago, my then 3-year-old granddaughter asked me, why don't I live in the same city that she lives in, because she never gets a chance to see me. I told her it was because I have to be at Torchlight. And she said, is Torchlight more important than me, Grammy? I stayed at Torchlight 10 years after that, and I'm still there. The EC division required that we provide certain documents and provide an update by October 18, 2021 as requested, but we never received any response or feedback. So we thought we were on track after we submitted all of the documentation in that October 18th report. As Dr. Pam Bainsley mentioned in her opening, Torchlight Academy made leadership changes, increased our capacity to address EC noncompliance, and have been working diligently to resolve all the issues that have come to our attention from the EC division. As Dr. Pam Bainsley mentioned, we have appointed an internal EC task force to fix the EC issues. This team has been working consistently to resolve all EC noncompliance issues. Mr. Dustin Squibb has joined our team as our new EC director. Mr. Squibb has experience and a proven track record of helping charter schools with their EC programs. All of his previous work, their charter schools are in 100% compliance thanks to Mr. Dustin Squibb. Mr. Squibb holds a North Carolina license, an EC license, and an EC administration license. He also holds a principal and superintendent's license. Just before I present Mr. Squibb, I'd like to ask a question. Why would Torchlight ignore for 2 years all of the letters and calls that were stated that we received? We would literally have to be crazy to do that. No one in their right mind would ignore all of the calls and emails. If I knew about it, which I did not, the severity of it, we just thought we would just work toward fixing these problems, had no idea of the severity of it, and we also had 0 complaints from parents personally. Well, we had one that was mentioned by the DPI representative, but we've been open 20 years. We're not having a lot of EC complaints, 1 or 2 in 20 years. The parent, and I am there every day for 10 hours, 12 hours. I see the children being serviced. This is not a situation where children have not been serviced through the pandemic, because we are talking about the 2 years we were out of school during the pandemic when all of this happened. The 18 years prior, Mrs. Andrews had no EC complaints or violations, so 18 years, everything's fine. 2 years during the pandemic, all of this takes place. And that is the main point that I want to make, that we would have corrected it had we known we were trying to feed 600 children who didn't have food, they were at home. We were trying to make sure they received Chromebooks. We were trying to make sure that they had access to internet. So we were spending our time doing that, and then we also felt that the children were being serviced. If someone says they weren't being serviced, that is not true. They were. Every child were being serviced. And that is just something that can't be refuted. I would like to just say that it was user error. It was not, it was trying to navigate ECAS, and the then director wasn't successfully able to navigate it, and she was just trying to put the information in, and this is the end result. But I want you to know that it is impossible for us to continue to not fix it. It is currently being fixed as we speak now. It is being fixed, and we did service the children, and they are happy, they were happy, and the parents were happy throughout this process. And now I'd like to present Mr. Dustin Squibb, our new EC director.
Yeah, I have to grab it. Yeah. It's for mine. Yeah, so I'll pull it for a second.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
You might want to speak a little louder.
Can you pick the mic up just a little bit?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Dustin Squibb, the new Executive Director of EC for Torchlight Academy. When I started 6 weeks ago, I had 7 focus areas that I really wanted to see or provide strict oversight in my first few weeks and few months of supporting the school. Those areas include EC student support schedules, ECATS compliance, IEP folder compliance, related service providers and support, the child find and referral process, our systems approach, and EC ongoing PD. I'd like to start first with my #1 priority coming aboard Torchlight was EC student support schedules, making sure that students were supported and had a schedule that reflected their IEP service time and location. My initial review occurred on Monday, October 18th. Our initial focus was ensuring that all students with disabilities had a schedule that reflected their IEP. This has been an intentional process. So over the past 6 weeks, we've been intentional on gathering data, conducting transition meetings, and potentially scheduling multiple IEP meetings for students over the next few weeks and months. So there have been meetings that have been conducted up until this point. We're going to re-meet with these parents and regarding these students as we continue to gather data from teachers and our new EC staff. As IEPs have been updated and continue to be updated, student schedules were and are continuing to change. And these schedules are reflected in our new student support schedule based on their IEPs. All students currently have an EC support schedule that matches the needs determined by the IEP team. And this has been submitted to NCDPI for both schools. ECATS compliance. I was granted access the first week of November to the ECATS program, and I have administrator view-only access to ECATS. I do want to make it a point to note that I have had constant communication and collaboration with the two consultants for both schools. My responses have been timely, and we've coordinated multiple times each week during my support thus far for both schools. I conducted an initial audit of the ECATS program, a needs assessment, data collection, and we have conducted IEP team meetings. The question was asked earlier, how many students with disabilities are on the Torchlight head count? That number is 45, based on ECATS documentation. Currently in the ECATS system, 42 of those students are compliant based on ECATS compliance measures. And we have 3 students currently in the referral process. One second. There's been some conversations in this meeting thus far about documents being altered. And I actually had a conversation with the consultants, and just from my observation on this, and it appears to be simply user error, where meetings were scheduled, held, and then the backtrack of meetings and entering documentation for those meetings is what occurred. I was told by one of the consultants that it did not appear that this was malicious activity. And based on my audit, I don't have that opinion either. The next important foundational element was the IEP folder compliance, or IEP folder compliance. My initial on-campus review occurred on November 3rd. I spaced this out. This was 2 weeks after I was brought on to support both schools because I was waiting for that ECATS access so I could essentially match and see, what students were on our head count, as well as are we missing any students. I conducted on this date an IEP folder audit to identify needed action items. At this time, all student IEP folders are fully compliant, and I want to be a little bit more specific than that. I can guarantee today that all students have an active IEP and a prior written notice in their folder. All students have an IEP folder for both schools. Related service providers and support. I've identified the contracts for our related service providers, our psychologist, our speech, our OT, and our PT. All students that require primary speech language support or any related service currently have a schedule of support for both schools. I will be, and I will talk about this a little bit later, overseeing the referral and the initial evaluation process to ensure we meet the requirements of the 90-day timeline and identify students and support parents that make those referrals. And just to kind of discuss again what I just mentioned, the Child Find referral process, that oversight will be provided by myself. From referral, evaluation, to the eligibility determination, and in the event a student has a reevaluation that requires evaluations, I'm going to ensure that that information gets to our related service providers. The evaluations are scheduled, conducted in a timely manner. Our systems approach, and certainly we'll have many more requirements and duties, but these are just some important elements that I've listed here. Myself, the referrals. I'm going to LEA rep all IEP meetings. I will be the point of contact for all of our related service providers, especially when it comes to the evaluation process. I, along with our compliance specialist, will be conducting weekly ECATS reviews. Moving forward, I will be putting together and applying and submitting all of our grant applications, IDEA, all the child counts, etc. And as the director, I will be providing full program oversight. Our case managers and our EC teachers. Case managers will provide direct special education support, not just oversight, but support. They will serve as case managers for a specific caseload that they support. They'll be responsible for data collection and data entry into ECATS. I, along with our compliance person, will be providing oversight of that data entry. Case managers, along with EC teachers, will provide co-teaching support and instruction with general education teachers. Our case managers and our EC teachers will participate in weekly and bi-weekly PLC meetings. We go back to the previous slide. This is essentially, this slide is our chain of command. And at this moment, we are still waiting for our compliance director, April Broadway, to receive ECATS access. But she'll be a big part of our compliance elements when it comes to appropriate documents being created and finalized in ECATS as well. But that is our chain of command. And up until this point, we've been very intentional with our EC professional development schedule. This has been submitted to NCDPI. This is what's been conducted thus far. And this will be ongoing for the remainder of this school year and years to come. And that's all that I have, unless there are any questions.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Squibb?
On your ECPD schedule, I think it was your last screen, are you saying that you were in attendance at those virtual meetings, which is before you were brought on? October 21st?
I was brought on, I believe it was October 13th,
Okay,
and
you said
started.
6 weeks ago, so I was.
I'm sorry.
October 13th?
I believe that was the first day I conducted I want to make sure I give you the accurate date. I conducted my EC, the initial review of the support schedule on October 18th.
Right, so the answer is yes, you were either conducting or attending all of these?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you working full-time for Torchlight?
Part-time.
And how many other schools are you the EC director for?
At the moment, specific EC director for 5. And all 5, if I may add, are fully compliant across the board.
I'd like to thank all 3 presenters. I do have quite a few questions. I've taken lots of notes, so if I may. Are you, just to clarify, so you're serving basically then as a contractor to this school. Are you a direct employee of the school, or are you an employee of Torchlight, the EMO, that the school has then subcontracted the business operations to?
It's my understanding I'm a direct employee of the school.
Is that the same as your predecessor was? Or was your predecessor, what was the arrangement with the former EC director? Were they employee of the school, or were they employee of the EMO?
Well, Dustin wasn't able to answer that. They were an employee of the EMO.
And
In our contract, it is a joint employment. It's just like Mr. Squibb is.
So he's an employee of the EMO?
Ma'am?
He is an employee of the EMO?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't
That's
realize
okay.
that.
Mr. Squibb, were there IEP team meetings held with families between November 24th and December 3rd?
Yes, sir. To be real specific about that, several of the IEP meetings we're having to conduct at the moment are having to be put on paper copy ECATs and then data entered into ECATs after the meetings. So dates could possibly be inaccurate for the data entry, but there have been, of the 11 IEP meetings mentioned earlier, 9 of those, I believe, had parent participation.
Over the Thanksgiving holiday.
I'm showing dates 11/24. I believe the school might have gotten out 11/23. We arranged these IEP meetings prior to the break because obviously this is going to be a process that's ongoing. The families we met with prior to Thanksgiving break and after the Thanksgiving break, we're going to meet again with those families as we collect data, but we do have obligations to ensure that students have active IEPs. And it was at these meetings we were able to do what I like to call transition meetings, where families got to meet our new EC staff, got to meet me, collaborate with teachers in these meetings, and update the support schedule to the best of our ability.
And so those meetings did take place with families, with you present, and other staff members present between November 24th and December 3rd.
Yes, sir.
So was who makes up your IEP team?
The required members, myself as the LEA, the EC teacher, the parent, and one general education teacher.
And those people were required to work over Thanksgiving?
When we scheduled the meeting and sent out invitations, everybody agreed to the meeting dates. And obviously having the capacity to do virtual meetings helps tremendously.
I have a couple other questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
I guess my next question is for Dr. McQueen. So the notes that we were provided earlier say that on April of this year, that the EC director, who at that time would have been Ms. Andrews, confirmed that all EC staff had completed the ECATS training. But the EC department here says that that's not true. Why would your director claim that the staff had completed that training?
It was because those modules are long and there's a test at the end of the modules. So they read the modules, but if you miss any one of the items at the end of the module, let's say there's 10 questions at the end of that particular 35-page module, if you miss any one of them, then there was a problem continuing with the next one. So they read the material, but they did not actually, as my understanding, they did not actually pass the test or completely. You have to pass them 100%, and they didn't. But they did read the information. So that's why they didn't get a certificate. And that's why she mentioned that they took the course.
They hadn't completed it.
I guess, yes. They didn't complete it, but they read the material.
So you mentioned that, I think your correct words were, we have to be crazy or something like that to ignore hundreds of calls and emails. Are you suggesting that are you suggesting that those calls and emails never happened, or are you suggesting that you just weren't aware that they happened?
No, I don't know how many came in. I don't think I said hundreds, but
You did.
I don't know. Hundreds was an exaggeration. I apologize. So no, I don't know how many. I was listening to Sherry Thomas say there was many that came in. So those emails, what normally happens is when I get an email, I kind of scan through it and then I look to see, I just kind of scan it. So in some cases, I do remember receiving an email that said non-use, ECAS, non-user ECAS. And when I saw that title, non-user in ECAS, I just simply said, oh, okay, we have to get trained and we have to become familiar with using ECAS, because we never had that problem when it was CCAS. Zero problem. So what I did was I called other charter school directors. I called and I text messaged, and I actually have a copy in my phone of the text messages. I text message Jennifer Lucas at Voyager Academy, and I said, hey, Jennifer, my EC director doesn't understand ECAS. Can you please help? And I sent one to another charter school, and I have all of those text messages in my phone. So I was trying to get help so that she can be proficient at ECAS. But no, I did not read it. I did not actually read the letter to see the severity of it. I just looked at the subject line, and that's basically, well, that is what happened. I tried to get help from other sources because I felt that if we got help to understand ECAS, then we would be able to fix whatever problems
This
are
dates back
around.
to February of 2020. I mean, your staff not understanding how to use ECATS doesn't seem to be something that just occurred
Right.
recently.
No, because the ECAS has been around, I think, 3 years, and she didn't understand it well enough to use it properly. She was told
Whose responsibility is that,
to,
to know how to use the system? I mean, are you not contracting with your EMO that's a service that they're providing for you? Should they not know how to use the very system that you're paying them to use?
the EMO is separate from the director who didn't understand the ECAS system.
I thought we just heard that the director was an employee of the EMO.
Well, the director is it joint?
So my response to that, sir, is this, that I'm usually not made aware of every instance, or our team is not made aware of every instance when there's a challenge. We're not aware, as my wife talked about, the severity of the lack of ECAS access and how this particular director was struggling with that. So if it come to light, of course, we would have addressed it. We know that the ECAS system had problems. It was shut down 3 or 4 times. It major delays.
Respectfully, this is not about access. This is not about the ECAS system having a shutdown. This is about an employee of yours who's responsible for inputting EC data into the state system,
Yes.
saying that they don't know how to use the system.
Yes.
Yet the school's paying you to keep this employee to do this work.
Yes, absolutely, sir. Well, as you know, in many organizations, you don't always know all the items that are taking place. And yes, we're responsible for making additional support for that staff member.
Is this staff
Sure.
member still on? Is Miss Andrews still on your staff?
Yes, she's still on the staff. She's helping us through the challenges that we're facing right now. Yeah.
But she's not part of the EC team.
Is she a family member?
I'm sorry?
Is she a family member?
Yes, she's my daughter.
I would just say, I think one of the concerns that I have, and my name is Stefan Bowes, and I'm general counsel for the school, is that we're missing the forest for the trees. The problem hasn't been identified, and the school and the EMO are taking significant steps toward resolving the problems that have been identified. And the focus at this point is on ensuring compliance. And the communications that have gone forward thus far have demonstrated the schools and the EMO's willingness to correct concerns when they're raised. And so we could go through and, from a legal perspective, I could characterize some of the communications by the state to the school and in a different light. I'm not going to do that today. The point for this committee today and what the school is trying to show you and what the EMO is trying to show you is that they are working diligently to move forward to resolve these issues. I think you heard it best when you heard it from Dr. Pamela Banks-Lee as it relates to the school's willingness and the staff's willingness to resolve the concerns that have been raised. To the extent that there are issues related to specific IEPs, you've heard a new director come on and say unequivocally that there is a plan in place to resolve any concerns that have been raised. I've been doing special education law and education law in general for more than 27 years now in this state. I was here when the charter school law was written, and surprise to many of you may be that when I was at the Justice Center, I opposed the legislation for charter schools. But I can tell you unequivocally about the impact that Torchlight Academy has had on students, both regular education students and special needs students. I have represented students who were having difficulty in Wake County Public Schools, who has a much larger population of special needs students and had significantly more problems than Torchlight Academy. And I can tell you about the type of care and assistance that was provided at Torchlight that was not provided at Wake County Public Schools. I can go through a litany of students in that way. I grew up here in Raleigh. I know the impact. I grew up in Southeast Raleigh, where many of the students from Torchlight come, both African American and Latino. And I can tell you the good works that they're doing. Now, if the focus of this committee is to address the concerns, this board, these individuals are here to address those concerns. And we will address any legitimate concern that has been raised. There's been communication with the Department of Special Education. I deal with this department all the time. I also represent students with special needs. If I thought that this body and these people were not here in good faith trying to resolve the concerns that have been raised, I wouldn't be here today. And what I'm telling you is give them the opportunity to make the corrections. They've already been sanctioned at this point by the Department of Public Instruction by not providing them with the federal funds. What more do you want to do at this stage? Certainly, we're here in good faith trying to resolve the concerns. Certainly, the school is making every effort to address the concerns that have been raised and is here before you. You have a new director that detailed a plan. You have a new director and new employees and existing employees who went out and went the extra mile to hold meetings with parents over Thanksgiving so that they can ensure that they are working toward resolving the concerns. If anything, this is an opportunity for this CSAB to say, these people get it, they understand, they come back with a plan, they're working the plan. That is the purpose of the notices that have been sent by DPI. And they're working the plan, and they're going to continue to work the plan. Give them the opportunity, please.
I appreciate that. I don't think there's anyone here, and I'll speak for myself instead of the whole board, that doesn't think that you want to have a chance to get yourself back in compliance. I don't think that that's in question. I think it's fair, though, on our end, the very people who are asking, give us a chance to get back into compliance, are the same people who put you out of compliance. And so I think it's fair to ask questions about how did you get into this situation? why has it taken so long to get back into compliance and the additional time that's needed? So I think these are fair questions that are being asked of the school and the EMO to explain how we got to where we are. Because we can't trust that there's a path to move forward and that can be executed properly if we don't have an understanding of how we got here in the first place.
Sure, and we don't disagree that you need to know how you got here. We also understand that one of the critical points at this stage is addressing the concerns first and foremost. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about how you got there, but more importantly, making certain that the students are served is the number one priority. And that's the effort that you've seen by this school right now, making sure that the students are being served appropriately. And so we understand your need to understand, and we are here to answer those questions. And what we are saying is that there's a question as it relates to the characterization of some of the statements that are made in the report that was submitted to you. If you want us to argue about those, we can. We haven't come to try to argue about some of the characterizations that are made in the report. We've come to talk about what we're doing. Now, if you want to do that, we're happy to have that conversation, but let us know what the purpose of the meeting is, and we'll be prepared for it.
And I just wanted to say that it's not going to take a long time to come into full compliance. As Mr. Squibb just said, we're already in compliance today as we speak. So it's not that it was something that was so difficult and something that took 2 years. It's not like we've been working on trying to get compliant for 2 years. We legitimately were not aware of the severity. When I saw the email saying ECAS, not non-user ECAS, I said, oh, okay, well, we'll get that person using the ECAS. It's not, we had no idea of the severity of the email, and so, and that's really what happened.
Dr. McQueen, where I'm struggling with that is that by your own admission, you said we'd have to be crazy to ignore hundreds of emails and phone calls. If ever that many, to me, if I'm in your position, the second phone call means this is severe.
I didn't get 0 phone calls is what I got. 0.
Okay, so
and what
them?
I'm saying is that Mrs. Thomas, I don't know how many she said, but it sounded like a big number. It wasn't hundreds. She didn't say hundreds of phone calls and hundreds of emails. She didn't say that. I don't remember the exact number she said, but let's say she said 40 emails or 40, I don't know how many. I didn't get any. I got 0. So
your EC director, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm not asking to be difficult. I'm really trying to ask
I didn't know.
Through from your perspective. Are you suggesting that you didn't understand the severity of these issues because you didn't get the direct communication from the department, or is it because your school did or the EMO did, Miss Andrews did, and she wasn't sharing that with you or not making you as aware of how severe this really was?
Right, and she didn't know how severe it was either. She just said, oh, I have to become proficient at ECAS. At one point, she had conversations with someone at DPI, and they said, well, just keep your records on paper and get them into ECAS as soon as you can. So she has always been under the impression that what she was doing was fine until we could get that information into ECAS. So there was no point at which she, nor I, nor any of us knew. And I never got a phone call, and the only letter that I saw was that one letter that I just referred to you, that I just mentioned to you. So no 40 or whatever the number was that Sherry Thomas said, no.
Are fiscal, do you keep fiscal this is maybe a question for the EMO. Do you keep fiscal documents on your school at locations outside of the school?
At the location where I was asked for the documents, that was Three Rivers Academy in Windsor. Our financial records are not kept there. They're mostly electronic. We don't feel that building is secure enough. So, no regulations as to where our financial documents must be stored, in a cloud or wherever they like. One of the reasons that there was some hesitancy about providing the documents, we were under this, I would characterize it, this unannounced visit, and asked for this information with respect to the finances, is that I don't want to provide any misleading or wrong information. So in order to make sure that we can provide the correct information, just like Ms. Thomas did, she was asked about how much we received in funding. She said she didn't know. She would have to go and find out. So we want to make sure that our information is accurate and do the research, because as we talked about, some of the characterizations did not fit, and it can be easily explained with with some conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Since that time, though, Bruce, we have submitted all of the required documents. I think there was a submission back in October 18th. We have yet to receive a response about any of those, all of the financial documents and data that we submitted. So there was no time of response at all to that. We did, however, receive a response to the IEP concern. I think there was an investigation with audit of the documents on December 3rd. We were sent this other document last night, which kind of characterized the overall work that has been done by Dustin and our team as still systemic non-compliance type of things. Now, let me just say this, we're talking about finances. 20 years in our audit, we have never had an EC violation. 20 years. That, to me, shows capacity to resolve. We have no unanswered or unresolved non-compliance issues 20 years. There have been tremendous successes that this school has experienced. And you feel it's kind of, the question almost is in reverse. I mean, why should this board be recommending revocation to a school like ours? We're the only school in the black neighborhood serving black children, black and brown children, and successfully doing it. Successfully. There's no issue that we can't handle. So, I have more to say, but ask your question.
I've done with my questions, thank you.
Are you saying that now you are currently also fiscally compliant?
I don't think we were ever out of compliance fiscally.
The coding system that
Yes,
Ms. Thomas talked
the
about?
coding system. What happens with that? Because federal funds are being received later and later and later. When we first started, we got our federal funds September. Now, late October, November, we're using local and state money to cover our expenditures, particularly in 060, because every dime of 060 money goes to salaries. Every dime goes to EC salaries. Why? Because it's easy for us to track those numbers and to quantify those numbers and not deal with many of the other concerns out of that. So there's some reclassification that is required after we have expended state or local funds to properly expense the 060 funds. And so I think the mention by Ms. Thomas was about 16, 17, 18, 19, those years. In that time, during that time, and I have this document here. LinkU, the system that's required for us to use by the state, went through a revision. during that revision, this was back 2018, I believe, they lost a lot of our data. I think this happened in a couple of schools. They could not provide a trial balance. There were over about 30 emails that went back and forth between myself, Lynx, our auditor, to try to come up with a trial balance. I sent this letter. This letter was sent August 12th, 2020 to Alexis Shaw, Chief Business Officer, and it was copied to many people, and it described in detail some of the concerns of what put our MOE out. And part of that included the loss of data or the inability to develop a proper trial balance after our data was lost by LinkQ. And I have their emails from their directors, which talk about what they were trying to do to help us resolve it.
Do you not have records of when you did you reclass? All of us have to pay stuff out of state and local till we get federal money. That's just life. But when you went to reclass, you don't have any documentation of that you reclassed?
I'm sure we do. Yes, where my CPA reclassified those funds in order for us to use them. So I'm not sure why they're not showing up there. They should be, because when we reclassify it and our auditor looks at it, he sees that the funds have been expended properly. So when we took over as the EMO, one of the things we wanted to make sure you know where the federal funds were spent. All the funds. Make sure you report out. We actually, our CPA at the time, we didn't really know how other EMOs were operating or how we were supposed to do that. So she created 2 accounts within Links in order to make sure the reporting happened in Links. And this is detailed in this letter. And by doing so, created an imbalance that looked as though we had this huge amount of funds in order to bring our MOE back into balance.
So did I understand you to say that you were not there on September 21st because you weren't ready to disclose any financial information yet?
No, you mean this was at the second meeting? We had not done a thorough research of all of the concerns, and we wanted to make sure. It wasn't because I wasn't there. It was, remember, they were in 2 places. One, they were at Torchlight in Raleigh. The other place is in Windsor. I'm being asked for this information in Windsor. Now, on that date, I got 2 staff members that are doing whatever with the payroll or whatever's taking place there. So I couldn't say, well, okay, stop everything and let's gather this data, because it's a research project.
Right, so on September 20th, I understand that happened.
Yes.
And then you were scheduled to meet the team on the 21st.
I'm not sure if me personally I was scheduled, or they may have been continuing to ask for documents.
That is what we have notes.
Yes, but
stating.
subsequent to that, we did submit those documents.
But where were you on the 21st when they came to meet you as scheduled?
That may be in their notes. I didn't have a schedule with me to meet, but
You were supposed to be at Torchlight with the fiscal consultants.
yes, ma'am. I don't think we had, it's a miscommunication, because after that point, of course, we submitted all the documents. I mean, these are financial records. I mean, they can't be changed and that kind of thing. These are audited records that were available and now made available and have been submitted, and we still have no response to that. So when we have a situation like that, we're, I guess, similar to what maybe Ms. Thompson experiencing. You know, we don't close the loop. So we don't know whether you got the documents, whether they're satisfactory. Should we bring more documents? Did we satisfy the request? So it's important that the communication be two-way street so that we can move forward. Yes, ma'am.
Is your compliance director here today?
My compliance director for finance? My finance compliance
On
director?
the org chart?
EC compliance director.
April. She is not here today. She's in Kentucky, but we can get her on the phone. She did say
I
she
didn't need to
would.
speak with her, I just felt it was important that she participate in
Yes, ma'am.
these.
And I agree with you, because that person that we hired for that specific task today, does not have view-only access. That is a thwarting of our efforts. That's an access that would be provided to a classroom teacher at that level. Now, for her not to be able to see, this is a person I'm currently paying, Bruce, as the EMO, that can't help us, because that kind of access, not access to change any records, not access to do anything, simply to view so she can advise and consult with other team members. She does not have that access.
Right, and I think it was important that she be here today, and as her EMO and employer, it would seem to me to be important to you to have your compliance director here.
Yes. Well, we did ask for postponement. We asked that this operation be postponed. We received the notice the day we went out on break on the 19th. That we came back, I think the week following that, and so we realized we were up against a pretty stiff day. How many days was that? 6 days? Six business days. 6 school days.
April Broadway already had a meeting. April Broadway already had a meeting in Kentucky.
She had 6 business days, and she couldn't change the meeting in Kentucky. We did ask for postponement, because 6 business days is not a lot of time to prepare for something of this magnitude.
And let me also say that it is important for her to have access. Many board members, state board and others, they come in telephonically. That's the world we live in right now, Zoom, telephonic. So we can definitely get her and speak with her, but it's also important for her to have view-only access. Wouldn't you agree? Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. McQueen?
I have a question, Dr.
For Dr. McQueen? Dr. McQueen, they have questions for you.
So I want to go back, and I preferred the way I'm understanding, is, and the way I think about schools as a person who works in one, is kind of the buck stops with the leader. You've made the point about severity, so I guess I want to ask a few questions within that. And these are just kind of in no particular order. So you got the review, the compliance review letter indicating some of the issues. What was your initial response then?
On October 8th, when we got that document listing all the...
October 8th, what year?
21. That's when I got the document listing all of the issues, on October 8th this year. And then I created a task force, and I literally stayed up 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning Googling folks that I could possibly hire to try to increase capacity, people who already knew ECAST. And then that's how I found Dustin Squibb, and that's how I found some of the other staff that I hired immediately.
Point of clarification, just so I understand. The compliance review was conducted in February of 20. You're saying you got a report on October of 21?
The report I'm referring to is the report of October 7th, 2021. The report from the February visit, I did not see.
So you never saw that?
No.
Were you there with the unannounced visit?
No.
So you weren't there, and your director wasn't there?
Correct.
That's why they could not get files?
That is correct.
Were you there when they came back the following day?
I did come the following day, but I think they had just left by the time I got there, but Ms. Broadway was there, and they saw the files, they saw the students, they interviewed the teachers,
So
they looked at the schedules.
So you understood that personnel from DPI decided to make an unannounced visit to your school to look into EC files in which they weren't able to access in the first day. They came back the second day, they still didn't have access to yourself at least. They got access to files, did interviews, still had concerns. This all stems from bigger concerns they had. And none of that sparked that this is like, oh shit, like if I,
Oh,
that's me, I'm
absolutely,
pissed,
I
I'm
did,
with
yeah,
that.
and that's when I started looking for folks who could help us with ECATs and help us get into compliance. So that's what I spent all my time on. It's very difficult to hire folks that are EC familiar, well, that have a EC license and have ECATs familiarity, and I did that right away. This is September 21st.
What was the unannounced visit?
Wait, I'm talking about September 21st. September
Date of the
21st.
unannounced?
20th and 21st.
But it's documented as far back as February of 2020.
That's the report she said she didn't get.
She didn't get that.
But
And then the unannounced is September
this year,
20th, that was this year.
this year.
this year.
And I acted immediately, absolutely,
But no, that's not what
immediately.
you said a minute ago you got the report on October
7th.
7th, and that's when you acted.
This.
I'm talking about the unannounced visit in September, even though it's a month.
Oh, yes, oh, absolutely. That's when I looked for people. I actually hired people, looked for people and hired people, and.
Did you contact the special education department after they conducted 2 days worth of visits?
I did. I sent different communications to the EC department, and I was under the impression that we were working together in partnership. I was literally sending emails, I was sending constant emails, and the emails were very encouraging. I was saying things like, thank you for helping us. This is what we're trying to do now. And it was back and forth, back and forth. Ever since then, it has
So in
been
between
back
that
and
date
forth.
and February of 2020, you had already said that you contacted some friends regarding learning the systems and trying to get training. We have established that your daughter was
Mrs.
the
Andrews.
was the special education leader. So it is worth noting within that you have a report out. You've already acted somewhat on it, that you're seeking assistance. You have a connection to the special education director, not just as an employee, but personal. And none of this sparks severity, as you said, lacked severity.
Well, what her, this is what she was told. She was told that she could use paper until she could completely understand ECAST. As long as she used the ECAST template. So that's what she was doing. It wasn't, so we thought as long as she was doing that, everything was fine. We did not know everything because she was working, doing that. We didn't know everything wasn't fine until September 21st, when they all came in. And that's when I said, what in the world? And then we've been, since September 21st, when they came in with however many people, until now, as you heard on the report from Dustin, we have everything back into compliance. So
What I don't understand, I've been on the other side of this, and when these reports are done, first off, my EC director will run up to my office and basically be like, hey, there's one or two things we need to work on. Second, they email you. They send hard copies most of the time, if I'm not mistaken, to your place. You're saying throughout all of this, you never saw the February report, despite the fact that your EC director did get it, despite the fact that I would assume they emailed the director, meaning you. They sent hard copies to your school. None of this, you never saw the report until October of this year?
You know, that, when she spoke about the,
She's the director.
no alarm, she was speaking about this email that said non-ECAS user. That specific email is what she was referring to, and I wish we had the exact subject line. That does not say anything about, you got a, big problem, it doesn't say anything about it.
Did you see the report before October this year? I thought you said you did until October of this year.
You're talking about you have to be specific.
The February
report,
the
no, I didn't see it.
On-site
No.
program compliance review done February 6, 2020.
No,
Did you see that before
No.
October of this year?
no, I did not.
Did you know it existed before October of this year?
I knew that no, not specifically what it said, the details of it, no, because I would have acted on it. There's no reason not to act on it. There's absolutely no reason at all not to act on something that you know is serious. It's just,
And you do see how that's difficult to understand, right? Given the fact that you just said you've had numerous interactions with the special education department. You said you were emailing and everything, despite the fact that you have an EC director who is obviously in conversation with you, despite the fact that the report is done, is emailed, is hard copy to you. All those pieces, you didn't
I
see
don't
it.
have a hard copy. I still don't have a hard copy. It wasn't sent to me, but I was referring to the September 21st. I thought you were talking about the September 21st. I have been in constant contact with the EC department since September 21st. That's what I thought you were referring to.
I got a bunch of.
In February of 2020, in Eddie, who did you have listed as the school director? Who did you have listed as your EC director? In Eddie, because that's how they decide who gets sent what. Whatever's in Eddie is how they decide who gets sent what. So, who was listed as the school director? Who was listed as the EC director?
Yeah, I was listed as a school director.
And who was listed as your EC director at that
Mrs.
time?
Andrews at that
Was
time.
at that time also?
Yes.
That's who the reports would have gone to. I know that for a fact. I've been through 4. And you get a report, the director gets a report, the EC director gets a report. And so I don't know how you didn't know it existed.
Well, I'm not trying to pile on either, and I know I got a lot of my DPI friends here, so I'm not trying to step, but I'm like Joe Clark. If somebody comes in my building from DPI, we know DPI is in the building, you know what I mean? And so, and my staff knows too, that especially after something like that gets done, they're gonna come back and say, I wanna know what they did that day. You know, so maybe it was just the fact that whoever the staff was dropped the ball, but I can tell you, it's like somebody is in the building that I don't know, somebody's gonna tell me about it.
And
So I don't know how you'd
And
not
at
know
the end of the
detail-
monitoring
details
visit,
in the
before
house.
they leave, they meet with the team and
Yeah.
tell you, so that you have some idea what the outcome's gonna be before the paperwork shows up.
And it was, yes, but
And
it
they
was.
tell you what the deficiencies are. Like I
In that-
had 2 folks from the EC just this last summer. 2 folks that sat down with us after it was all done. They called for the 2 EC teachers to sit down and go over. Here's what we're going to send you. And so I already knew going out the door what we need to work on before they even sent us the report.
But it was right during the pandemic time, and we didn't get the report until when they closed, or
After schools were closed.
right after schools were closed, and it was just a scramble to do all of the things. We did not have a problem prior to the pandemic with EC. So for 18 years, we didn't have a problem, and it's the same EC director for all of those years. So the director knows what they're doing. It's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. It was the pandemic. My mother died right then as well. She was actually volunteering at Torchlight. She was a teacher for 42 years, volunteering at Torchlight for free, never paid her. She came for 12 years and had just died at that time as well, right at the pandemic, and they closed schools down. It was just a lot. It was a lot, and it was an oversight, but it is not systemic, and it is not that it can't be corrected. It has been corrected as I stand here. It has been corrected, and with my mom, she was 92 when she passed. And she lived with me in my house and then left my house every day and came with me to Torchlight and tutored the children. It was a lot to deal with that at the same time as dealing with the pandemic, trying to get my 600 children fed with broadband, with internet, getting them hotspots, and dealing with all of that. You have to keep in mind that that same director for 18 years had no problems at all.
How did you manage EC during the pandemic?
We were doing it virtually.
Okay, how were you managing the paperwork shuffle because you still had people who came up for annuals and all those things that happened in the, how did you manage the paperwork shuffle during the pandemic?
Yeah, the paperwork, what they were doing, they held Zoom meetings, of course. They sent information to the parents through DocuSign, and, she was keeping paper, doing paper is what was happening.
Okay, so these things were happening, they just weren't in ECAT.
Exactly.
I have to say, and I wasn't going to say this, but I will. I think you're in a position where you're out of compliance, or we're out of compliance. You guys have different viewpoints of where you are out of, but you're out of compliance. You just were, and EC department was not exactly a well-oiled machine. It sounds like those are my words. You got to own it. You got to what's being done to fix it. How does this board and then eventually the state board have confidence that it can be fixed? At the risk of being the bad guy, you can't blame the pandemic. There's 10,400 and some schools in this state that face the same thing. Mine's one of them. The pandemic didn't cause your EC director to say that the staff had went through ECATS training and completed it when they didn't. That has nothing to do with the pandemic. The pandemic didn't cause you to miss deadlines when other schools in the state met them. The pandemic didn't create a situation where IEP files are being altered. It was a challenging time for 10,483 public schools in this state. And somehow they also stayed in compliance.
Bruce, I would think that's a broad statement to if I looked at all schools that were that they're all in compliance. I don't think that would be the case. It would take a little further
No, they're probably not all in compliance, Don, but I think you get the gist of my point, that you can't blame the pandemic on some of these things that we're learning about today.
Absolutely.
And the pandemic, absolutely, I can guarantee you, the pandemic hit your school harder than it hit mine. I'll be the first to admit that. And the challenges you faced at your school with the pandemic, I faced challenges too. They were different. They had different scales, but they didn't create. My ECATS, my EC director doesn't say that my staff completed training if they didn't do it.
Yeah.
My staff doesn't go back and alter files. These are the things this is the stuff that's happened that we're faced with. So all I'm saying is, can we not blame this on the pandemic?
Bruce, we've been here the whole time. I don't think anyone from the C staff mentioned pandemic.
Your board chair did, and the head of school did.
I know you didn't, though. Anybody here did. Yeah. And I don't know why not. Because the pandemic did affect every single person. Now, on some level or another, big or small, it had an effect. Mm-hmm. Now, you're right. It didn't have our EC director to maybe misinterpret what the staff had gone through, but not the language to say, basically lied about the information that was provided. We have no record of that. In our history, we have no record of lies to DPI. Now, in addition, to say altered records is also inflammatory language that leads someone to believe that there was some type of absconding of information, or we didn't want to provide information for some reason. We don't know. But that's not what happened here. This EC director has accolades going back for 3 years, 100% compliance with, what was it, Dustin? Indicator 1.7, what is it?
11.
What, indicator 11, 100% compliant, award winning. So, yes, some things happen, maybe happen to different degrees to other folks. One of the things that I want to point out here, and this is from the EC department, they acknowledge on 4/16/20, emailed the acknowledgement receipt of the delayed handbook and indicating prior completion of the report. And then email response with thanks and intention to follow up on the records. Now this was after the February 20th report that came out. Now it's August 24th is the next email correspondence from them. That's a 4-month gap. Email responded to unexpected records request document intended for Wake County and asking about the status of ECAS access to reviewing student records. Email response indicating someone else in the school must have sent records requested by accident and asking for access to ECAS training. We're asking for ECAS training. My director is asking for ECAS training. Now, if you've been in charter schools, Mr. Sanchez, you know run charter schools, last thing we do is call DPI. Because when you call DPI, you do not know what you're going to get. Most of the time, what you're going to get is some type of rebuff or some type of threat or some type of, oh my God. You don't tell DPI, I'll call my friends, I'll call my other charter school operators. I will call anybody before I call DPI. Because what I expect, and this is in the dissertation, when I read the dissertation of Dr. Swenson, this was mentioned as one of the 3 components inside the Department of Public Instruction and inside the Office of Charter Schools. It is a well-known fact, and I, as a founding member of Black Led Schools of Choice, I know how we take it as Black charter school operators. It seems like there is technical assistance. I don't see that. What I saw in my judgment was a raid. Nobody picked up a phone to call anybody. You said a phone call could do. Isn't that a common courtesy for someone that has served in this capacity for 20 years? Anybody else we have earned the respect, just a common respect. For somebody to pick up a phone, send an email, hey, y'all in trouble, listen, how can we help? No. I'm going to characterize it as I saw it, a raid to come in to find things that were wrong. So
Mr. McQueen,
yes,
they returned on the 21st, and you were made aware of that, and you didn't show up. I mean, respect goes both ways.
Yes, it does. But, I know people in authority. We always think we're right. But that's not true. And we always believe that we're deserving of the maximum respect. It should be mutual. And I agree. I can't tell you why or what happened on that specific date, but I can tell you that we responded to all the things that was asked of us, and we have no response. Is that not also a mutual respect? After we do comply, we send the documents. Okay, these are wrong. Shred that. Do it over. Whatever. Just tell us what it is.
Are there any other questions? For Torchlight, any other questions for Torchlight? Ms. Thomas, if you could come back up, I have some follow-up questions.
Absolutely, and I have a few more documents for you.
I'll start with your questions, and then I have some responses.
My experience with EC monitoring, or any monitoring, federal monitoring, all those people monitoring, my experience has been that before they leave your premises, there's an exit interview. And in that exit interview, you get some sense of what the findings were. Also at that time, you're told how long you have to make any corrections. That is followed up with a report that arrives somewhere around 30 days later, which goes to whoever was listed as the director in ECATS and whoever was listed as the EC director or the federal programs, depending which monitoring you're doing. That document is very clear about what you have to do, how do you fix it, what do you need to do. You have, and it tells you how long you have to get that done.
Correct.
Once you get that done, you get a letter then saying, this is now cleared up and the world's a wonderful place again. That's been my experience.
That's the process, and we followed that process. In your packet, you should have a letter. It's dated April the 21st, and it is attached to the report. It's in your packet, and it was addressed to Dr. Cynthia McQueen. And then what you just received was the email where that was distributed through email as an attachment to Dr. McQueen. And everyone that's CC'd below received a copy as well through email of the report and the letter. There was a debriefing meeting that was held on February the 26th following the review, and it included Dr. McQueen, Ms. Andrews, and then 3 of the EC division staff who had conducted the monitoring visit, Dr. Karen Little, Libby Loring, and Sue Stone. So there was a debriefing meeting where Torchlight was notified, these are the findings we have, these are the things you may begin to work on and start addressing until you get your official report. So just as you described, that was the process that we used that day. That is the process we use every time we do a program monitoring visit or a physical monitoring visit.
I can understand how Dr. McQueen didn't see it as being super serious at that point, because at that point, they're saying, this is not right, fix it, you got this long to get it fixed. So I get not freaking out, of course, I freak out anyway, but I get why you wouldn't freak out then, I really do. How long was it between the time the letter went out
Okay?
and the time that EC followed up because you weren't seeing things being fixed?
So in your packet also is the EC technical assistance log. It starts with January the 16th of 2020. And there's documentation through February. There's one for March, one for April, one for May, one for June, 3 for June. It goes to July, it goes to September, and it continues on. I think it's current as of maybe Monday of this week.
What is the current compliance status of Torchlight today, and the financial compliance status?
Okay, so child count, as you know, starts December 1. We have to certify by December 20. So my staff go in every day and run a report for the whole state so they can target those that are still out of compliance before we get to December the 20th. As of this morning, there were 18 students in ECATS that are compliant, and there are 18 that are not. Of the 11 meetings that we heard about that were conducted over Thanksgiving and into the first part of December, those are not in compliance. Those are in an email that is attached in your documentation as well. I'm going to show you what it looks like. It looks like this.
Why are they not compliant?
They are missing items. that would require compliance. So there's a breakdown of what's needed by student number. I think that was the second handout you also received here just a minute ago. Let me look at that. I take that back. It's listed in that email. We broke it down. We communicated with Mr. Squibb yesterday multiple times. Staff did around pieces and parts that were still out of compliance. And it's broken down by the student number and then the items that are problematic.
And Mr. McQueen says that it said in October, I think October 18th, he said, they sent you the financial documents that you had been asking for when you were there in September.
Yes, they did submit through Google Docs. They brought some items in. We have staff who have been furiously trying to review and approve the IDEA grant and our other special grants. And so those got reviewed between having a week of conference and a week of Thanksgiving. Those got reviewed last week, and we're still missing items in there, and that will be communicated to them today.
Okay, but they have not yet been notified that.
No, they have
that
not.
those things
They
are
have
still
not.
missing.
But we did give that list of the required items that we needed on the 20th. Mr. McQueen addressed me directly that he would be at Torchlight on the 21st, and he would have all those documents, and we did hand him a hard copy of the items that we were looking for. And there were staff in that room. We were in the principal's office, so that's where we had this meeting. But he assured me that he would have those and everything would be fine, that he had the documents and he would provide those the next day, just to follow up.
So these documents that you're looking, is this the maintenance of effort documents you're looking for?
These are budgets. These are contracts. I don't know what all on that list they were still
actually have.
providing, but it's what you would get in a normal fiscal monitoring. So you're going to be asked for personnel action reports to ensure that these folks are spending 100% of their time in EC, and those reports have to align to the budget code saying this person's being paid out of federal dollars. And those are the kind of things we're missing.
Okay, now, one of the things that, because they are a whole school, a whole school, no, I guess that's just Title I, that's not EC, never mind.
Yeah. But we've still not been able to receive a budget with budget codes to do that alignment that we need to do that cross-check for. If I could, the statement was made that 18 years they had been in compliance. They were in a program monitoring visit 5 years ago as well, and they were non-compliant during that program visit as well.
Did that get fixed within the
It did
timeframe?
get corrected. It did get corrected. I also did some checking with my staff to just ensure we did conduct other monitoring visits right before and as COVID was starting, and those have all been corrected that were non-compliant. The compliance date for this visit should have been the 26th of February 2021. We extended that through April because we wanted to give some grace around the difficulties we've all dealt with through COVID. But it is now December and we still don't have compliance even after that extended period to April.
Does anybody else
Well,
have any
let me make
questions
sure I
for Ms.
understood what you
Thomas?
just said. You said that, how many schools were out of compliance in 2021?
We did monitoring visits that had non-compliance. I don't have the exact number for you.
So,
But we did other monitoring visits that had non-compliance that have been corrected. You did ask me for some numbers, and some information. You should have just received a September 1, 2021 letter that was addressed to Dr. McQueen and Mr. McQueen and Ms. Andrews that explained the ECATS issue. So that was the formal notification of those records in ECATS that had been altered. You asked about their funding, the 2021 funding for the school age IDEA funds. So our PRC 60 was at $110,707. We show a child count of 39 today, or 36 actually, because we're showing 18 and 18 compliant, 18 not in compliance. The the items that we compared, you asked a question about when we did the hard copy audit review on the 21st of September. There's a document in here, and it's included in that October 21st report that compares what the paper copies looked like to what we were seeing in ECATS.
Okay, where is that? I'm sorry.
It's in the report. That,
It looks like this. You have one of those?
yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Sure. Gotta find it.
That's what I do as a teacher.
There's a lot of paper today.
Yeah, I got it.
Let me see if there was anything else you asked me earlier about.
While she's doing that, do we have access to the presentation by Mr. Squid that we could potentially pull up some of those numbers and just ask for quick verification?
You guys have any?
Yeah, I mean, I was just good to her.
And just for reference for you, the document I went through earlier that started with the general highlights, it was organized based on the email from Mr. McQueen this morning that was delivered right before 10 o'clock. So the line items on the left, I should have told you that earlier. Those line items align with with his report. I apologize for that. I thought I said that. A couple of other things. So the Canvas courses must be completed. You have to register in NESIS in the Canvas course in order to access those courses. So what we were looking at from the back side is that no one from Torchlight had enrolled in any of those courses until after our visit in September.
Can you access the course if you did not enroll in it?
No.
So what would they have, we were told that they read
I don't know.
the training, but just didn't take the end of, like the assessment at the end.
I don't have,
I'm sorry, that's not a
yeah,
question.
I don't have an answer to that. But you have to enroll, and that's when you show up. And that's what we're doing, is checking in NESIS, into those Canvas, through NESIS and the Canvas courses to track for the CEUs.
Okay. So it's not something you can just go in and read on your own without having pre-registered.
You know, if you found PowerPoints on the website or out on the internet somewhere that looks similar to that, you could have done that. We did have some PowerPoints that we worked through the IEP process earlier before ECATS went live, but not to complete the ECATS modules in Canvas. You have to be in Canvas.
Did you say that no one was registered?
No one was registered until after our visit in September. And I think they all finally got registered, I don't know, end of September, 1st of October. And then we were notified they had completed all the courses. There was a statement made that ECATS was shut down several times. ECATS has not shut down since it went live on July 17th, 2019. They may have a operational update weekend that's notified well in advance that they have to go down for a certain period of time, but it's a minimal amount of time because they're doing upgrades or they're doing updates. But to be just shut down and not accessible has not been the case. I also want to clarify a statement that was made. The EC Division has not sanctioned Torchlight. We have delayed funding. Their grant for the 21-22 school year was submitted finally complete, all corrections and errors dealt with on November the 29th, I think. Funding is just now starting to go out because of no state budget. Budget staff in the building have been working to try to figure out what operational dollars they had. They weren't touching federal dollars, but the grant opened in early May and it was finalized on the 29th of November.
And Mr.
You
Squib,
have a
did
co-
Mr. Squib finalize that? Was that finalized by Mr. Squib?
I am not sure. The email I saw was from Mr. McQueen that it would be finished. So I don't know if Mr. Squibb is in the grant system. I would assume he is, but I don't know that for sure.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
So the numbers that were given to us Torchlight Academy's ECATS compliance has a, and I know you went over numbers, but just if you can respond to this.
Sure.
Has a current head count of 45, has 42 students in compliance, and 3 that are completing the referral process.
So our view from the state level shows there are 36 records in ECATS. 18 have met compliance, they've got the green check if you've been in ECATS, and the other 18 are not, and that includes the 11 that were done since late November till 1st of December.
The 11, were there trends with that 11? I know you gave the report, I had trouble.
Those things are actually, and I hate to refer you back to all this paper I've handed you today. If you look.
I was looking through it shortly, but like,
Yeah.
I was
Is this
wondering
the
on
one
your end.
Torchlight document concerns, is it that one?
It is
Is that the 11?
No, it
here
has
on the
screenshots.
December, Monday, December the 6th email,
Oh, the screenshot.
and it's a little hard to read because they're screenshots, but it lists the errors. So
Are you
yes,
saying-
they were in alignment with what we found on the original monitoring visit in February.
That's my point. So there's 11 that were done during this time. First off, is this 11 that had issues, all 11?
I think so.
We can go through that. But that's, there's a difference between, as we call it, dotting i's and crossing t's, and whether or not this is some level of a pattern that aligns to almost a 2-year ago compliance report. Are you suggesting that this aligns with what was found 2
Yes.
years ago?
They're the same non-compliance issues that we're finding. It's completion of the process. I don't want to call it the paperwork, because the paperwork is the documentation of the process. But it's that full referral data to do reevaluations when we're seeing no data. And you don't have to do an evaluation. You don't have to do assessments to complete a reevaluation, but you have to show data to support the need for continued services and to develop that new IEP when it's an annual, you have to do that new IEP when you do that reeval. And we're seeing no data uploaded, we're seeing no indication of data reviewed, but reevaluations have occurred. So that's a compliance issue. You can't just reeval doing a piece of paper, going through a process in a system, and not attaching data sources to support the need for services.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a clarifying statement. I had when I was making the point about the pandemic, I misquoted that number of schools is 2,600 in North Carolina. Public schools is what I was trying to refer to, but my point remains the same.
It was more powerful when it was 10,000.
That's right.
So the additional handouts you got were the documented concerns, and this will maybe go back to your question, Mr. Sanchez. This document that looks like this has the concerns in ECATS where there have been changes made without documentation to older previous IEPs. You should have received, I think it was the letter notifying Dr. McQueen about the ECATS, and that was September 1. And then you have the 2 emails where we sent both the report and that notification, and neither of those emails bounced back, and that is the same address we have continued to use throughout our communication with Dr. McQueen.
Are hard copies still sent, or no?
No.
That practice?
No, we stopped that right before COVID, actually. But they are, we track to ensure we're doing them through DocuSign, so we make sure they've got signatures on them. And that email is followed up, and if it bounces back, then we call the school to get a corrected email, so.
You said you've been in part with the department 14 years?
Yes, sir, I've been here 14 years.
Is it standard practice that you don't give a heads up to the school when there's a unannounced visit? I mean, was this unannounced visit treated the same as all other?
Yes, it's been done before. Because of the reason we felt like we needed to go in, which were the altered documents, we felt like we needed to go in and get a good, clean look at the records at the school. But we can there's nothing either in state board policy or in IDEA that prohibits us from doing an unannounced visit. And that has happened to other places at other times, and probably will continue to, if there's a need.
I have one other question. Has Torchlight Academy been asked to submit the proper coding in their fiscal
Yes.
reporting?
Yes,
And
it's
how
on,
long
it's
would you
on that
say?
list of requirements for the fiscal monitoring. That's a budget with codes is a
For how
requirement.
long have they been, like, the first request, or when were they first non-compliant in the coding?
When we were there in September.
Prior to that, they were using the coding?
I don't know if they had fiscal monitoring during that February visit or not. I'll need to look at the report
Right,
to see
okay.
that. Because it's all starting, there's a lot here to go through.
I know.
But I will look real quick to see if we did some fiscal monitoring then.
Okay.
I'm feeling a need to go into closed session to consult with our attorneys. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Yes, I'll move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A3, to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body.
A second?
May I ask a
Yes.
question before you
Yes.
move to that motion? May Portlight respond to the new information that has just been shared with the committee?
Absolutely.
Prior to you going into
Absolutely.
closed session?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You seconded that, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Hilda?
Thank you for letting me follow up. On my ECATS compliance screen, I'm showing 46 students with an IEP. 3 of those are showing the compliance indicator of a red stop sign with the E, and those are the 3 students that I referenced in my presentation that are currently in the referral process. We have 5 students with the caution sign, but the caution sign is still a compliant IEP. It's just the end date is up for review. The IEP is about to expire. I wanted to get that information.
Okay, so at this time, we will, oh, we vote, okay. Are you, I'm sorry, are you finished, Mr. Squibb?
I think so. I'm trying to remember. I think that's it, unless you guys have any other questions for me. I'm fine.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we go into closed session to consult, oh, you got, somebody else wants to talk?
I'm sorry, I want to make sure that they all get the opportunity to respond to.
Absolutely,
anything that's said.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Abby Zell, and I just wanted to add a couple contextual points of information. There have been schools that have gone over a year, and we did not come in with the intent to say no fault had been made. That's why we made the adjustments that we did over this past month, adding a compliance director, adding a new EC director, and I think we can't discount 20 years of operational experience and 20 years of promising operational experience. We can't discount the fact that the EC director we brought in is compliant with 5 of their schools. We can't discount that the compliance director served in a very similar position at the Office of Charter Schools. The other school that, it came before this board and they actually presented at the state conference just this past week was out of compliance for well over a year, and you allowed them to come back and facilitate an action plan. We've started the facilitation of that action plan.
Please name the school, because I don't know who you're talking about.
Do you want me to just name it?
Who, I'm sorry?
You want me to name it?
Yeah, I don't know who you're talking
Okay.
about.
New Dimensions.
Okay.
And this has happened a couple of different times. That's one of the more prominent examples that we researched. So those are just a couple of things we wanted to put in front of you, because we know that mistakes were made, and that's why we made the adjustments that we did. Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to speak? Dr. McQueen?
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
I just wanted to say that I was there at Torchlight yesterday with a new hire. Her name is Dee, and she's she's a licensed EC teacher. She went over all of those, the documents, and she said that in her previous schools, the way she conducted those IEP meetings, that is in line with the way she's always conducted them, and that's in line with how, other people conduct IEP meetings, but yet it was deemed that those files were not in compliance. But Dustin has, but if you actually go into ECAS right now, is it correct that it says there's no stop signs at any of those? So that they are, she said that it was, she was explaining to me that it was deemed yesterday, we got the email yesterday, that those were out of compliance, but she was telling me why it was deemed that way. It was the way the IEP meeting was held, but it was not held in a manner that was inappropriate, and it was not held in a manner that was illegal, and she was shocked that.
So is this, are we talking about the 11?
Right, that's
That's
correct,
correct.
that's correct. And so if you actually go live into ECAS, it doesn't show they are non-compliant, those students.
I wanted to add a little bit regarding those 11 students. Of those, and I apologize, I haven't had an opportunity to do a deep dive in that because we received it so late yesterday in the afternoon. If you do a deep dive, I believe it's 38 bullets were completely out of our control and not related specifically to those meetings that we conducted. For example, the first student, the 3-year eligibility due date was on 10/13/2021. I wasn't even a part of the Torchlight at that time, so obviously that was listed, but that wasn't a direct result of our work in this meeting. And that's just one example. There were about 38 bullets on this report that were out of our control. And some of those were listed here that were non-compliant. No new data was requested as an example. Well, that's not necessarily a non-compliant action. But it's also noted in here as well. I just wanted to point that out as I dig deep into this report. If DPI does have any concerns, I will collaborate with the consultants. I've been doing that, and I'm going to continue to do that. And anything that they deem is non-compliant, we will make it right.
I just wanted to conclude by saying that, again, you all have asked what happened. I think we got to the point where we got an idea of what happened. And then the question was, what's being done now? And that has been the essential focus of the presentation today by the school, what's being done. And I'm gonna end the way I started, which was, we could quibble with all the findings, and we can go back and forth and say that some of this information isn't correct, some of this information is premature, but what we have acknowledged is that there were some issues. And what they have acknowledged is that they are working diligently to move forward to resolve those issues. And just like any other school would have been given the opportunity to resolve those issues, Torchlight is saying, give us the opportunity to resolve the issues of concern. They will be resolved. They have to be resolved. So, with that, we will close and say thank you for listening to our side. And thank you for conscientiously considering what has been said and all that's come before you. To the extent that you all have additional questions, Torchlight stands ready to resolve any concerns that you have and to address those concerns in an appropriate manner. As you've heard, they're working diligently to try to resolve the concerns, and we thank you for taking the opportunity to hear. Thank you.
We're going to close. Did we not vote yet?
We got a second.
We got it, okay. It's been properly moved and seconded that we move into closed session. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
We're just walking into it, so I'm gonna just stand on the phone now.
I'm not sure.
You can hear, yeah, I'll put you on speaker when I get it.
Sure.
My drinks, beverages first.
non-compliance in exceptional children in Torchlight Academy. Therefore, I'm making the following motion. I make a motion to recommend to the State Board of Education that Torchlight Academy be placed on level 2 governance probationary status, and that if the non-compliance detailed by the EC Department of the Department of Public Instruction is not completely cured within 30 days, that more severe action be taken up to and including revocation of Torchlight's charter.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ashley, would you please take the roll call?
Todd Godby? Lynn Berger?
Aye.
Cheryl Turner?
Aye.
Bruce Friend?
Aye.
Rita Hare?
Aye.
Hilda Parlay?
Approves.
John Eldridge?
Aye.
Eric Sanchez?
Aye.
All right, it passes unanimously.
I make a motion that we adjourn December
Well,
meeting. of
first, let me
the-
let them know what happens
Oh,
next.
sorry.
You will receive a letter that will detail everything that needs to be in compliance within the next 30 days. This recommendation will go to the state board. I'm not sure exactly the date. They have a called meeting coming up. I'm not sure if they're gonna take it at the called meeting or if it'll be in January. So from this point, it goes to the state board, but you've got 30 days, get it done.
Now I make a motion that we adjourn the December meeting of the CSAB.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unless we plan this.
Because it was not after. He was supposed to second.
Oh, yeah, because you really
Rita, I
don't leave until the next day because
Second.
He was supposed to second.
training. Well, there's training at 6 o'clock in the morning.
I didn't hear you answer.
I'm sorry.
I felt so bad, so now I take the 10 o'clock.